Have you got a vase like this at home? They're really quite fashionable at the moment. You might know them as windowsill vases or mantelpiece vases. They're quite long and very narrow. I'm Julie from Julie Davis Flower Workshops and Flower Start, the online flower arranging classes. You might find though you've got a problem when you arrange your flowers because they fall around because the mouth of your container is just so large. You could of course use flower foam, but nowadays people are moving away from using that single-use plastic. I'll show you how, by using some floristry wires, you can create your own mesh grid and arrange your flowers through those. To make your wire mesh, you're going to need some floristry stub wires. These wires don't have the plastic coating on them, so when you work with them you're going to get really mucky fingers, but it doesn't matter whether you use the bare wires or the plastic coated ones. These floristry wires are a 0.90 wire. You could also use a 0.71 wire, but the finer the wire, the less robust your resultant mesh would be. I'm going to start by twisting two of my wires together, starting at the end, crossing one wire over the other and twist them in place 3 or 4 times. I'm going to repeat that a few more times until I've got the length of the piece of mesh that I want. You can see how dirty my fingers are starting to get already. So I've wired up, twisted up 6 pieces of wire so far. If I lay those out, you'll be able to see them, and then you can start to imagine what the mesh is going to look like. So at this stage it's going to get quite complicated because we're working with more than 2 wires at a time. I'm going to try and make it easier by just having 2 sets of wires, and you can see here where they cross is going to be the next place for my next twist. And then this becomes my next wire. Lay the next one over the top and twist again. Then using this wire, add in the next group of wires, and where they cross, twist. So every piece of wire is joined to every other piece of wire. So I've got my initial twists along here and then my second row of twists along here. So I'm going to go back to the beginning and start twisting again. So the first 2 wires are twist together, and then the next group, and you can see how the mesh is starting to develop. Next 2 unattached wires, and then the next 2 wires, and continue on to reach the end of that row. Then start back at the beginning again. So this time I'm going to leave this wire here and take these 2. The more rows and twists you add, the more rigid your mesh becomes. But you will need to measure up against your vase or your container to see how much more of the mesh you need to create. So I'm going to use this bowl here that I bought from a junk shop several years ago. It only cost me £1 because it's got this huge chip here. And on the back it says HO Birmingham 4968. So I shall see whether my mesh fits. That's looking pretty good, but I do need to be able to fold the mesh over on the edges so it catches and holds in place. So what I'm going to do is add on some more wires here, another row, just so I've got plenty to work with. I'm ready to attach my last wire here. So all my extension wires have been added. Now what I'm going to do next is to go back in and just cut off the excess wire so I can see where I'm working. So I've added my extension wires, I've cut off my loose ends just to neaten things up a little bit, but look how dirty my hands are now. And I've also cut myself, so do be really careful. And then we continue on, grouping the wires together, continue to make more twists and a wider piece of mesh. It does get quite tricky when you've got long wires that you need to deal with. Just remember you're thinking of pairing up the wires. So just try and concentrate on 2 wires at once. So carry on twisting until you get to the end. I think probably I can get one more row of twists along here. And here's my completed mesh, which again once more just measure up for size. You can see that I've got plenty of room there for wrapping the mesh over the edges and securing it in place. I do just need to watch out though for these spiky bits, as I don't want them cutting into the stems of my flowers or scratching me again. So I'm going to make sure I really tuck those out of the way. I also take the opportunity for curling the ends of the chicken wire up here as well, just so there aren't any scratchy bits. You bend it over with your pliers and you can roll it round. It gives a bit of a decorative finish at the same time as well. There's my finished mesh. I've neatened off all the edges and just tucked away and pinched down with my pliers where I needed to, just so there aren't any snaggy bits of wire to catch me or my flowers. So I'm all ready now to add that to my container and push it down and shape it so it'll be fixed, and that'll be supporting my flowers.